Hey guys, welcome back to another episode. We're playing at the Hollywood Park Casino this time, and historically this has been one of the nicer rooms in the LA area, worth visiting in my opinion, especially after the remodel. It's a pretty nice high limit room, and a really good selection of food. That said, the high limit room is now shut down for the most part, and new for this visit, there are now metal detectors at the entrance of the casino. If you plan on coming to this location, definitely opt to using the valet, especially if you enjoy playing late into the night. During my visit here, the 5-5 and 5-10 games were hosted on the main floor right by the main cage. It definitely was not as busy as I would expect, and this could be attributed to the whole pandemic or the fact that the World Series is going on in Vegas at the moment. Probably both. We had intentions of sitting in the 5-10 game, but unfortunately it wasn't running until way later into the evening. And by that time the lineup didn't look that great, so I stuck to the 5-5 tables. As a side note for those looking to play professionally in the LA area, my recommendation would be to stick to the 5-5 games with the ones that you can buy in for at least $500. The smaller buy-in games are not beatable long term due to the high cost of living, the drop structure, and all sorts of other considerations. With all that said, let's get into some hands. After shortly sitting down, we see Ace-Jack of Hearts under the gun and open to 25. One of the mid-position regulars and the VIP on the button calls. Action folds to the big blind, who now visibly postures with chips to raise. But after about a 15-second tank, he decides to call instead. Sort of odd, but I'm not going to let that deter me from playing my usual game. The flop is 997 rainbow, and when checked to me, I continue for 60, and only the button calls. This is quite fortunate, as if the big blind raised here, we'd have to fold our ace high, which is very likely ahead of the button's holdings right now. The turn brings the ace of spades. I decide to play this as a 2-street hand and check here, and the button checks quickly behind. The river 4 doesn't change anything, and I bet 110, and the opponent folds. After about another 10 to 15 minutes of play, 3 of the largest stacks at the table decide to rack up and cash out. There are another 2 regs at the table who decide to get up and take a really long break, leaving us in this weird 4-handed situation. The VIP signs off that he's not really comfortable playing short-handed, and eventually picks up as well after a while. This table has just become pretty mediocre in the sense that there is just myself, a bunch of short stackers, aside from one other reg. At this point, I'm thinking whether it's worth heading over to another casino. But I decide against it, as a mid-vlog transition would just be weird, right? One of the regs now gets really excited when they hear that one of the VIPs she knows is coming to our table. But then there's some sort of mix-up where the VIP gets sat down at another table due to an error by the floor. She's visibly upset and puts her name on the table transfer list, and since she seems so eager to make it over there, I decide to follow suit and place myself for the very same transfer. At this point, I was getting bored out of my mind, and it looked like it was going to be one of those grind fests. But in the end, this is what poker can be sometimes. Lots of small ball. It's like Pokemon, but with poker chips. Much of the action I received on this day was from sticky players hoping to hit a good card on the turn or river while in position. They didn't really try to hide it, and that's fine by me. This is part of chipping up. In the next hand, I have jacks under the gun and raise to 25. I get calls from 2 mid-position players. The flop comes 9-3-2 rainbow, and when I continue for 40, the person on my left calls 40, while the rest of the players fold. The turn brings an offsuit 6, and I continue for 110. The opponent doesn't think too hard about this one and just lets it go. For this next one, we mix it up with the very same opponent. We see ace-queen under the gun and raise it to 20. Only the player to my direct left calls. Heads up, we're out to see the flop, which comes ace-queen high. We've absolutely smashed this board, and I don't expect my opponent to have much of anything. In consistent pattern, I bet out here for 20, and as expected, the opponent calls. The turn is a 7 of spades, and this card doesn't change much of anything. I get a little tricky here and decide to check it over to my opponent, and he takes the bait and bets out 40. This sizing doesn't make a whole lot of sense here, and if he's bluffing here, the river is just going to check through. For those reasons, I decide to put in a raise here to 135 to target his hands that have some showdown value or ones which caught some backdoor equity like a gutter or a flush draw. Sadly though, he decides to fold, and we don't get any further value. We were finally called for the table change to get an opportunity to play with the fabled VIP player that the HPC reg hyped up. I was actually sort of intrigued and excited at the same time. She talked up a storm about this person, and as you probably already figured out, it was sort of blown out of proportion. Anyhow, as luck would have it, I get mixed up with the VIP player pretty quickly. The straddle is on, and when the action folds all the way to me on the button, I raise to 35 with ace-queen, and just the straddler calls. Now this VIP had been dishing out some huge amount of coolers at this table, catching 2-outers a few times to stack some of the players at the table. So I'll be treading pretty straightforward with this player and looking to charge full freight in case he's looking to stick around. The flop is ace-4-7, and I continue for 35, and not surprisingly, the straddler calls. The turn is a king completing the rainbow board, and I size up to 105, and he decides to fold. There are 2 additional hands I took notes on that's worth covering here. The first hand is fairly straightforward, as once we found our groove at the table, we started to exert pressure where it made sense. It's kinda unusual how many times we've had ace-queen show up today, but we have it again. The suited variety this time. The VIP player is under the gun and raises to 20, and to no surprise, there are 4 callers before the action gets to me in the small blind. Ace-queen is a really good candidate to turn into a squeeze play as I have some removal of cards for stronger hands. I decide to go for it and raise to 105 here. In retrospect, I think a slightly larger sizing here closer to 135 is probably better, but we're running 105 in this spot. The VIP now calls to 105, and that's when I get a little worried that this was going to turn into a 6-way bloater. However, we get lucky and only pick up 1 additional hitchhiker on the button. The flop comes down 993, and the floor abruptly stops me to ask to scan my player's card in mid-action. I decide to take the time to scan the card, as I figured this would give off an image of being pretty comfortable in my own skin once I bet out 200. If either of these guys had a 9 here, I'd find out pretty quickly, otherwise the 200 bet would be a decent deterrent from getting too sticky. Both the VIP and button folds, which yields a good result this time around. This last hand is a really good example of balancing ranges at the table. At these stakes, you can typically be really unbalanced, and normally it wouldn't matter that much. However, every so often when you become super unbalanced, it can pose a potential problem. In this last hand, our main opponent is the HPC Reg, who got me to table change for the VIP action. This player had been hyper-aggressive with bets all day long, often raising to $50 pre-flop with pocket kings and getting no action. The raise sizing correlated with her hand strength, and this person had been consistently laying down the hammer in hands to prevent getting a bad beat. We wake up with ace-jack offsuit in middle position and opt to raise to 25. I get 4 callers, MP1, the cutoff, button, and the big blind. The flop comes ace-6-4 with 2 diamonds, and when checked to me, I continue here for $45, to which only MP1 and big blind make the call. Based on this kind of action, I should have the best hand here most of the time. The turn is the 3 of clubs, and while this completes an obvious straight draw, I decide to bet out 115. The mid-position player forcefully shoves all in for 330, and the big blind folds. Normally, I think this is going to be a pretty close spot, as I only have to be right roughly 22% of the time here. The jack of diamonds is not a great card to have, though not having the ace of diamonds in my own hand is really important here. It becomes a much easier call when I start removing strong hands the opponent would have jammed either pre-flop or on the flop in fear of a bad beat. I toss in the chips for a call, and we're off to see a king of hearts on the river, and our hand holds up against the ace-7 of diamonds. I'd say today was another positive day on the felt. Not too many tricky spots to maneuver through. Anytime you can walk out with more betting discs than you walked in with is always a plus. Here are today's results. We were in for 500, out for 1512. Thanks again for joining me on another poker vlog. If you made it this far, please do not forget to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any future videos. It definitely helps the channel with the YouTube algorithms and gets these videos out in front of a larger audience, which is always great. For more up-to-date posts and any questions regarding this channel, poker, or just to say hi, feel free to follow me via Instagram at onlifetilt. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and see you next time.